chan nuair van íolta gauns na spéireann Chúil am ríomhainn eog sin téireach Sein fós gáil nan céig an uain Bhagríonn sa chuan go síoladh sa réalt chatéirí cheann san nearmailt nuair a hainneann óig go ceanal hamochail ársta chuain Sich dealt na haichrí túrling Slúp an brenn go cyn na flúrin Heid se gyn a oed a chúri Besúrach dog ach glúan Glys an íneach fáwn a horain Sefys ciwn mar grúch yn og fias Sfain tíisio géadín cónaí hamochail ársta chuain Chiaran láis chears na réaltain Sefys ciúneach suas na réaltain Hain óibh a brán galéireach Scharáide tab nó suain Iawn mi fasgur éalt na nogfen Hain mwgol ein chwan fasioleg Op fi'n chaidh yn bronoch Hamochail arsta chwain Yr un yn cion yn dion mohaleg Dylwn yn ripin tawn yn blahwl Si a gŵrn i'r eisiau arstri Dian mochrag arsta chwain Fa crile gael gwsganiag Noer y glach gmi hen i'r laifi Siap dol iord o gyl ha safad Hil mislan far arsta chwain
Neshe a chárstan seo an ceirh Òraid de gáirid ina dóil as a bhfuil mise a bhí as a chaidh. Agus hana trí eile a bhí tlachfar agus sáirite na dáin fallé. Ach gása go persanta ha bhí as a chaidh iad Òraid na blianasa na tlach sáirite. Agus sé gyfrach sé an deolalas a hacam éith agus a spéis a hacam gan an ar a hatars teachat na Òraid. Han deolalas a sé na doladais tiich blana fichiad as cór. Go am na a bheis na gopad le chéile program an Gaelic TV BBC an na Glasgow. Agus gat na chelmiad iad eichgin hier a chunig fa scúth sean. Ha de bhí na halachas gása mar a ha i de bhí de bhóran agus na misc gúte ha seán a dú. Díadach thurstas an na súl a chrúh scúlaí a lentin chun na Nineveh ást a gohfuú an dú. Get jarave in Geneva as arche a hound on the Groove School and an Alapa. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome again to this Sabhal Mòr lecture. As I've just been saying in Gaelic, it's a particular pleasure for me to chair this particular lecture. And that's because the lecturer is a friend of mine of over 30 years standing. But much more importantly than that, he's someone whose career I, as well as many other people, have watched with admiration and satisfaction as it's unfolded. Ken MacQuarrie, as the name suggests, given the other famous MacQuarrie who came from that island, was born and brought up in Mull. His father was from Mull, but like myself, he had the great good fortune to have a mother from Harris. He received his education in primary school in Mull, and then Oban High School before Boyd's time, it has to be said, Edinburgh University, and then Murray House College of Education. Now, I don't know about you, but I think of people who go into colleges of education as being intended and intending to become teachers. And I was asking Kenny about this last night, and he said, no, I never had the slightest intention of becoming a teacher. I just wanted another year of student life in Edinburgh. So I'm afraid, Ken, the SED, or whatever it's called these days, will be after you to claw back any grant you got for that year. I think you already have. Yes. And so it was that it wasn't to the classroom but to the studio that he headed in 1975 when he finished at Murray House, and he joined the BBC as research assistant to Neil Fraser in the Gaelic television department, a post in which I myself followed him, although for me it just turned out to be a career break from the law rather than the illustrious career to which it led for you, Ken. But at that time, Kenny went to work in Inverness as a radio producer and presenter, indeed, on what was then called Radio Highland, rather. And it's appropriate that we should have had an introduction of traditional music today, because he's a great lover of traditional music, and he produced and presented at that time a programme called A Fib and Boxa Senil, the pipe, the box, as in the accordion box, and the fiddle. And indeed, at one time, used to scratch out a tune on the fiddle himself, but I don't think he likes to be reminded of that now. It was at that time that I began to hear of the absolutely stupendous hours he worked. He'd leave his home in Dingwall in the early hours of the morning and wouldn't see it again until after midnight the following evening. But he had fortunately by that time met in Angela an Irish wife of infinite patience who has complemented him perfectly over the intervening years. We're very sorry that Angela isn't with you here today. It would be delightful had she been able to be with us. But I say over the intervening years, but nothing has changed in those intervening years, because 30 years later, he's still getting out of his bed at 4 a.m, not infrequently to catch the first shuttle to London to attend to BBC business down there. And again, he won't see his bed until after midnight. So he's still working those incredibly long hours. Now, his time in Inverness was fairly brief, and in 1979 he returned to Glasgow and to television, but as a producer rather than research assistant at that time. And since then, his passionate interest in all aspects of broadcasting, technical as well as artistic, his total dedication to the job, and very importantly, his original thinking and creativity, because Kenny is nothing if not an ideas man. Those things, those qualities, have led him in a steady progression through the ranks, first of all to head of Gaelic, then head of Gaelic features and children's programmes in 1992, head of broadcast in 1996, head of programmes in 2000, culminating in his appointment as controller, the most senior job in Scottish broadcasting, in 2004. Now known as director rather than controller, he sits on the board of management of the BBC in London. And landmarks along that illustrious way have included Yorpa. Only Ken MacQuarrie would have thought of having a regular European-based, European viewing current affairs programme in Gaelic, something which hasn't yet, so far as I know at least, been attempted in English, and only he would have seen it through and sustained it in the way he did. It was truly groundbreaking, original stuff. Then there was also the creation of the largest production base for children's programmes on television outside London, and of course what I've already referred to, and what it's particularly relevant and appropriate to remember in the context in which we find ourselves today, sitting in this studio, and given this college's role in training people for the Gaelic broadcasting media, Ken's crucial role in the setting up of BBC Alapa and sustaining it since then. Now, over and above his day job, so to speak, Ken has held numerous other positions in the world of broadcasting. Here in Scotland, he's been a board member of the Scottish Film Council and the Celtic Film and Television Association. At UK level, he is Vice President of the Royal Television Society, and internationally, he is a member of the International Press Institute, a global organisation of editors, media executives and leading journalists dedicated to the protection of press freedom. So Ken is very much a Gael, very much a Scot, but as has always been the case with the best Gaels and the best Scots, he has a world view. Now, the official blurb I got from the BBC says, quotes, among his many interests are sailing, reading and walking, and that is true, but I can add another one, DIY. He is a do-it-yourself obsessive. Neil Fraser, who was Ken's first boss at the BBC, and still I think it's fair to say, Ken, your mentor in some ways, tells me that he has a collection of tools greater than you would see, more impressive than you would see in B&Q and Homebase. But he doesn't just collect them, he puts them to use, most recently in the renovation of the old family home in Mull. Where do you find the time to do it is another matter altogether. Now, I mentioned another famous MacQuarrie from Mull. That was a reference to Lachlan MacQuarrie, who became Governor-General of Australia. But of course, there is a third famous MacQuarrie from Mull, and I'm pleased to say that he's with us today. That is Duncan MacQuarrie, Ken's older brother. I want to take this opportunity of just putting on record the debt of gratitude this college owes Duncan and a number of others who served as trustees round about the same time for having seen this college through really, really difficult times, make or break times. Those of us in the equivalent roles today have it easy, plain sailing by comparison. And it's down to the fact that people like Duncan MacQuarrie saw this college through the difficult times of its history and into the calmer waters in which we find more pleasant sailing today. So gonnachi ha mi uavasach talate go bhir cáldadain agus mar ha mi rá tidach bevallam tidach chud edach chláir mar go bí tidach chá taingela sa hásin ginál chacmsa mar go bí ha cantas join a college to seo son na rain sheevse agus na cáldadh ag an náma ha sin. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Ken MacQuarrie is always worth listening to for the originality of his thinking and the sheer reach of his view, of his vision. If anyone can see into the future of broadcasting, he can. So, Ken, it's with a great feeling of anticipation as well as with great pleasure that I invite you to give this year's Sabhal Mòr Ostaig lecture on the subject of changing media in a challenging age.
Tachblad Kajara Rurian. Brian Ganyusle Harston, Hami licht torretje wie naar Coinneach and Jew, agus ha na Vorgo and Òraid Honite Shaw or Shechat. Shen Guspar mi Berkachug, Kirchlag na Mianen and the Soul Kirchlachach, agus Aatje BBC, San Ruinshin and the Vichian the Fearing le Nyo Ishemlach. Crie Sherivish Ullug, ha and Lokeistjach. Agus impi BBC and Connie en nerpse Gosnug agus a Chumal. And the be Chesakug na Òraid, hook me Rui Peace and Roskus Barstock Gaelic, vil me misser. Agus na misk ha la in your lochi. Va me brennachug een Gilip, gak leek Ian Loam agus bar stille akin, and the be klarug hachastas en Òraid en la, and doi heen, agus get is dochen nach ro na skrivat, bullach kunt huv, benatert lochliriki neach la woende. Kujach, maar wie ik baarsje volle waatje kwaatje, wil ik het leeuwen neerken, is koendesen, skeelken, kjol is oren. Agus ik ganjen, go kirchlatjach saan zullen land ju, ha kut de routen nach hillekarigig. Leed, mianje ginje teunje, zo'n skeelken is neerken mun bij heen, smu wehe gunjille, se kleintjen zeenkin. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be in your company this evening, and an honour to have been asked to give this year's lecture. My lecture is on the subject of changing media for a changing world, and the role of the BBC in ensuring accuracy and impartiality are at the heart of its services. In preparing to come here, I spent some time leafing through my collection of Gaelic writings and poems for inspiration. I have to confess that I struggled to find too many connections, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. However, one of the epics of Gaelic poetry has to be La Innerlochi, Ian Lowe MacDonald's account of the Battle of Inverlochy of 1645. And in providing his eyewitness account of the battle, Ian Lowe was the journalist of his day. And although impartiality was not the hallmark of his particular journalism, as was their wont, travelling bards, musicians and storytellers were often the only source of news to many. However much the world changes and the speed of change increases, there are certain things that never change, and in particular, our desire for stories about ourselves and about others. Now, sometimes the enormous scale of change is best highlighted by the smallest detail. A week or two back, it was confirmed that D.C. Thomson was reviewing the future of the Dandy. At the height of its popularity, Britain's oldest children's comic commanded an average weekly circulation of around 2 million, and that has now dwindled to a mere 8,000 every 2 weeks. And in the current economic climate, there are real fears for the future of Corky the Cat and Desperate Dan. With much of its young leadership lured away by the attraction of the web and video gaming, the contest, it seems, has been too great for the world's strongest man. Well, why am I telling you this? Well, in one way, it serves to highlight the main focus of my talk tonight, the impact of new technologies on our lives and on the way we engage and communicate with each other, on the way that we draw on information to help us make sense of the changing world in which we live and the challenges that that inevitably brings. It may be that Corky and Desperate Dan are at last to leap into the digital reality of today, forsaking their adventures in print and looking now to live their lives in an online version of the comic. If so, they will not be alone, for that is where we are all spending more and more of our time. And a few statistics tell the story. There are out there approximately 850 million Facebook sites. Last year, there were over 150 billion text messages sent in the UK, and on an average day, around 250 million tweets fill the ether. That's about 3,000 every second. What perhaps is more worthy of our consideration today is not the quantity of material available in the digital world, but rather the quality of engagement which life in that world offers. The web has enormous potential for good. We use it to book our holidays, to buy our books and our theatre tickets, to read our news. With a few keystrokes, we can see our homes from space with Google Earth and sneak a peek at our neighbours should we wish as well. We can use it to find out what's new, what's trending, and we can access it anywhere at any time. There is no doubt that in many positive ways, the web continues to revolutionise our lives. But we should not forget that it also brings with it the potential for harm. Trolling, flaming, bashing are all terms that have recently entered the language for the wrong reasons to describe the new avenues the web has opened for those who wish to engage in abusive, insulting and hostile comment and criticism. That they can do so, often unfettered, is a result of circumstance, a product of an online world largely without social context, where anonymity is the norm and where the rules of personal engagement are quite different to those we employ when we connect with each other on a one-to-one basis. It is a world where the sanctions are few and far between, where users can feel insulated, protected, where freedom of speech, which we all clearly cherish, can be both used and abused, and where the channels of communication are as available to open discourse as they are liable to capture by interest groups keen to pursue their own particular agendas. It can be difficult to understand the digital world, to make sense of its bewildering complexity, as it can be to navigate it safely and assuredly. It is a world characterised by constant evolution and change, and to me as a broadcaster, that makes it all the more important that such evolution should not come at an unnecessary and unacceptable cost. Progress should not mean that we lose sight of the values and the principles that have served us so well for so long. In a digital world, one increasingly filled with user-generated content, it can be difficult to determine what is real and what is not. As I noted a few moments ago, there are indeed 850 million Facebook sites, but of those it is estimated by Facebook itself that around 85 million could be fake. On the web, everything is not always what it seems. Wikipedia isn't wholly accurate, and we should tread warily when offered news or information from sites in which we are not necessarily 100% confident. And it is for that reason, more than any other, I contend that the need for sources of information in which we can trust, in particular for authoritative, impartial and independent journalism in which we can trust, is as paramount today as it has ever been. Public service broadcasting has a clear responsibility to give voice to different communities, and pluralism should be a consequence of an involved participation in any democratic society. But only publicly funded broadcasters have the motivation to deliver that vision. Why we exist is at the heart of what makes public service broadcasting special. Yes, we inform, we educate and we entertain, but our purpose is to bring greater value to the lives of all citizens across the nations. It is our rationale against others who properly make profit. Our role, our duty, is to sustain, to develop, to deepen relationships with our audiences, relationships that are based on honesty and integrity. Most importantly, defending our independence and impartiality against any political, commercial, sectoral or pressure group interest is fundamental to the relationship between a public service broadcaster and its audience. And that is why I believe that the licence fee is much more than the public payment for a service or for content. It is the contract which exists between the broadcaster and audience. In exchange for an annual fee currently £145.50, yes, you'll get the full range of BBC television and radio services online, iPlayer, the SSO, Children in Need, and much more. But most importantly, what you will get is a broadcaster in whose voice you can trust. What you get is a relationship built on trust. Elizabeth Murdoch of the famous media dynasty touched on this very issue in her recent MacTaggart address at the Edinburgh International Television Festival. In discussing the recent controversy surrounding media standards, particularly in relation to the press phone hacking affair, she made the point that honesty, responsibility and accountability must lie at the heart of any creative organisation, as they do at the heart of any successful community. I fully agree. And to ensure due importance is placed on such principles, organisations, she said, need to discuss, affirm and institutionalise a rigorous set of values based on an explicit statement of purpose. And I've no doubt that Lord Leveson was listening closely to our words. For the BBC, those values and that explicit statement of purpose are enshrined within our Royal Charter and agreement in our editorial guidelines. And the Charter and the agreement clearly set out our public service purposes, and the guidelines rigorously and in detail set out the high standards required of all of those who make programmes and content in support of those purposes. They are published, freely available online, and they are part of what makes the BBC distinctive. They help our programme makers faced with difficult editorial decisions, and no more so is it the case that such difficult editorial decisions are faced than when delivering impartial, independent journalism in the changing social, economic and political landscape. It is a task that demands courage of programme makers, and in many ways, the smaller the community, the greater the degree of courage required. Our small team of investigative journalists in BBC Scotland has faced regular challenge from those who feature in the stories they tell. Threats to programme makers are not unknown, and legal challenge sometimes materialises, sometimes not. But that is as nothing when compared with the conditions some journalists encounter while working in countries across the world. To date, 99 journalists have been killed this year alone in the pursuit of their duties. That leaves aside the many who have been imprisoned, those who have been tortured, and who are valiant enough to pursue, in a phrase well known on this island, a free press. Yet, it is not all about journalism, though that is central to our public service provision. It is about ensuring our actors, artists and musicians have the platforms and the forums to speak of and to their communities, to give voice and expression to those communities. That equality of opportunity and access is a vital component, again, which must endure in a changing media and a changing landscape. One example of voice of which I am particularly proud is BBC Alapa, which allows the Gaelic-speaking community to speak to other communities across the globe. And I'd like to pay tribute to the students of Sabhal Mòr Ostaig, our partners MG Alapa, and the many individuals and voices who argued and persuaded for the existence of such a channel. In the world of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Google, to name but a few, the pressure and prizes for anyone entering the landscape are considerable. But although social media has a huge role to play, and we as yet have not the distance of history to understand how important it has been, for example, in the events surrounding the Arab Spring of 2011, there is no doubt that it has allowed individuals to differentiate as it has communities of interest to cohere. And at its heart, I believe that for all peer group networks, the shared experience of a creative offer will still have a huge place in our society and in the aspirations of individuals therein. Being able to comment, discuss, argue and celebrate is in the very DNA of our democratic society, and it is why, despite all efforts to suppress the language, the traditions of the Gaelic language are strong and remain strong. Language is much more than vocabulary or the means by which we communicate our feelings and understanding of the world around us. It embodies and serves to express not just who we are individually, but who we are collectively, reflecting our culture, our value systems, our shared history. And at the heart of that language is the role of the bard or a commentator or rapporteur. Although, of course, as I said, the impartiality for the bard could be a fatal condition if he adopted that too stringently. But that sense of a collective narrative aligned with his passion to sustain it, that is one of the drivers that has helped to maintain the Gaelic language and is one which will sustain it going forward. I think BBC Alapa is but one example of pluralism in the voices from our nation. I do not for a moment believe that despite all our efforts, we have sufficient diversity and plurality of voice. Social media challenges the broadcasters in this regard, and it is a challenge all broadcasters must hear and accept. The scale of the change and the pace of the change may have paused as a result of the economic conditions which currently prevail in the Western world, but they have certainly not been paused in the vibrant economies of the BRIC countries and around the Pacific Rim. I recently attended a demonstration of super high vision, the latest broadcast technology, which has been trialled capturing footage of the London Olympics in a resolution 16 times that of high definition and in 22.2 surround sound. The trials brought together NHK, the Japanese broadcaster which has developed the technology, the BBC and the Olympic Broadcast Service. Broadcast trials into domestic homes will not start in Japan before 2016. But in discussion with Dr. Kubota, the technical director of NHK, he told me that he has felt that the resilience of the broadcast networks in the face of the tragic events such as the earthquake and the tsunamis, which in recent years have brought suffering to the people of Japan and Southeast Asia, would ensure in his country that broadcasting would evolve but also endure. That need for a commonly shared news thread, capturing breaking news and offering it on demand, providing information and comment that can be trusted, will not disappear. In times of crisis, the power of the broadcaster to bring the nation together, to offer a common focal point, an outlet for news in which audiences can trust, should not be forgotten. That there still exist the occasions and opportunities for such shared experiences are clear, not just when bad news strikes, but also when there is good news. The audiences to our Olympics coverage tell their own tale, where Danny Boyle's vision in the opening ceremony drew a UK TV audience of 27 million overall, and nearly 91% of the entire United Kingdom population tuned in to watch at least part of the games. The largest television audience this country has seen since the pre-digital age. In many respects, the games have come to have been defined for the great British public by the comprehensive TV coverage they have received, which for the first time included 24 dedicated high-definition channels alongside a dedicated radio service. I don't think it is in any way wide of the mark to say that what we have collectively experienced has been the first truly digital Olympics. And it is heartening that the reaction to the coverage has brought some of the highest appreciation ratings ever for the BBC output, which 96% of the audience telling us that the programmes met or exceeded their expectation. So I'm now going to define some of the changes that we have seen in the use of media, where devices globally, such as mobile phones, are as plentiful in number as the citizens of the planet, and in countries such as Africa, they are the platform of choice, carrying information and entertainment around the world's second largest continent. For me, two words are particularly important in defining the digital age: compression and convergence. More and more information is available on smaller and smarter devices, and astonishingly the computer processing power now available via a 3G or a 4G mobile phone or a tablet far outstrips that employed on Apollo 11, which of course managed to take the late Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon and back. Moore's law, first expounded in 1965 by the co-founder of Intel, Gordon Moore, still holds today, that processing speeds, memory capacity, image resolution all continue to increase exponentially, doubling roughly every 18 months, and there is every reason to believe that the trend will continue into the foreseeable future. In a like manner, as the processing power of the microchip dramatically expands, so too does the capacity to store more and more information, both balanced against a corresponding decrease in the cost to us as consumers. Now, in terms of convergence, commonplace devices such as the smartphone and the television increasingly offer us the tools to multitask in ways that it would have been impossible a few short years ago. On both, we can now access the internet, download content, listen to radio, email, shop, In short, they allow us to connect with each other and with the world at large, unhindered by the constraints of time or place. Convergence has brought with it convenience in ways and on a scale hitherto unimagined. And just how ubiquitous the technology is revealed in the latest market report by the broadcasting industry regulator Ofcom. Each UK household now owns on average 3 different types of internet-enabled device, such as a laptop, a smartphone or a games console, with 15% owning 6 or more such devices. The Ofcom report also reveals that 4 in 10 of us who use a smartphone, for us, it is changing our shopping habits, encouraging us to go online bargain hunting or robo-shopping, and that's research offline, buy online to you and me. That is to say, we are now increasingly using our phones to take photos of products in shops, scan the barcodes, get more product information, make online price comparisons, read the product reviews, research the product features, and purchase via the websites. Add to that the continuing rise in popularity of internet-connected smart TVs, with 5% of UK households now owning one, giving consumers the ability to turf, both to watch TV and surf the web. In short, as the technology continues to evolve and expand, our habits change and our vocabulary adapts. It's certainly true that as more and more communications superhighways open to us, we are afforded more ways to connect with each other. But that begs an important question. What is it that we have to say? It takes no more than a minute or 2 of wandering the web, or following Twitter feeds, or ambling across blog comments to realise that the quality of comment is often outweighed and sometimes crushed by the sheer quantity of it. That's not to say that simple comment and conversation does not have worth, nor that it does not have a place in the digital firmament. Far from it, it is the stuff of our everyday lives. But from my perspective as a broadcaster, where I believe the real potential in the web lies is in its ability to offer us access to the full richness of our cultural lives and to experience the cultural richness of other communities, other societies, and other nations. As a public service broadcaster, the role of the BBC in this dynamic, I believe, is central. By way of illustration, let me point to 1 or 2 examples where I think the involvement of the BBC with a range of external agencies and cultural organisations has made a real difference, and where digital media has offered access and opportunity far beyond what would have been available in a non-digital world. The History of the World in 100 Objects was a hugely innovative project. It was run recently in conjunction with the British Museum. The story of our shared and differentiated cultural past was told on radio and on the web, and its existence on both platforms has allowed it to be told and enjoyed by audiences across the UK and beyond, by those who would not otherwise have been able to visit the museum and to access its treasures, and also to appreciate in detail their cultural significance. So too with our Burns archive. To celebrate the 250th anniversary of the birth of the bard, we set out to build an online archive of recordings of all his poetry, with readings from as varied a cast as His Royal Highness Prince Charles, the First Minister, Robert Carlyle, to name but a handful of those who contributed. The entire works of Burns is now online and freely available to all, a legacy product for the nation. And one of the latest developments in this area is the space which has resulted from a collaboration between the Arts Council England and the BBC. It acts as a compendium, an online location where artistic and cultural artefacts such as film, audio, text or images can be uploaded, stored, shared and enjoyed, whether your interest be in ballet, modern art, or in perusing the contents of the record collection of the late John Peel. It is the breadth of vision across so many areas of artistic and cultural expression that makes it so original an idea and one with such potential. And I'm delighted that the recently announced cash injection from the big lottery fund will help secure its immediate future. I could point to numerous examples of how the BBC and cultural organisations have achieved much more together than ever would have been possible alone, through collaboration and partnership. However, in this respect, I would like to draw attention to our work in conjunction with Creative Scotland, where together we seek to uncover new talent, to explore and provide broadcast opportunities for established arts organisations and individuals, and for those new to such endeavour. It is a creative partnership that continues to grow and develop. It is also one which serves to illustrate the role of the broadcaster in facilitating crossover from the arts to education. With our work with the Scottish Book Trust, which is funded through Creative Scotland, has resulted in a hugely successful venture that reaches out to tens of thousands of school children across Scotland at various points in the year. I speak of the Authors Live initiative, which brings a leading children's author to Pacific Quay in Glasgow and places him or her in front of a live audience of young school pupils. However, it is not an experience that can be enjoyed only by those lucky enough to be in that select group. Using the Scottish Schools Glow network via the IT arm of Education Scotland, each and every presentation and Q&A is streamed online to schools across the length and breadth of the country, attracting audiences of up to 90,000 and providing teachers with a valuable addition to their bag of teaching tools. I believe passionately that equality of access to educational opportunity is a basic right of the individual in a democratic society, and a core principle of a public service broadcaster must be to facilitate such access. That is why we place such store on education and learning, and why it is to be found stripped through our content from the work of the Scottish Symphony Orchestra with schools and community groups, such as you may have seen recently at the opening of the Cultural Olympiad, where the children involved in the Systema project in the Raploch district of Stirling, to our increasing focus on factual and specialist factual documentary, making to learning itself and the role which online provisions such as Bite Size also plays in support of the curriculum for excellence. Now, our children's department recently undertook some groundbreaking work with young inmates in the special unit at Berlini Prison in Glasgow to help them tell the tale that they wanted to tell, and to help other youngsters fully understand the downsides of a life of drink, drugs and imprisonment. Conceived, written, directed and starring the inmates themselves with technical advice from our craft and production staff, the result is a powerful and compelling film. It has since been used as the basis for further discussion among pupils and teachers at 5 Glasgow secondary schools, with a view to it being disseminated across all of the authorities' secondaries and into primary 7. It has also won praise from the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, who have requested to be able to use it within the work which the unit undertakes. Now, many of the activities I have just outlined perhaps lie under the radar of general viewing and also under the radar for the listening public. And arguably, we should do more to draw them to wider attention, to illustrate the added value that's offered through the publicly funded BBC, and to emphasise how much can be achieved when we work together. Hopefully, in one small way, that is what I'm doing here tonight. And perhaps one of the most successful partnerships has been our involvement with MG Alapa to deliver BBC Alapa. I cannot stress how important the strength of that partnership has been in building on existing BBC resources, skills and infrastructure, combining with them many practitioners in the independent sector, the best of training and working with other cultural organisations to deliver the service. The spirit, the collaboration, the trust and integrity has to be a model on which to build for the future. When we set aside the individual, corporate and institutional gain to do what's best for those who pay for us, success is guaranteed. To conclude, I think it is fair to say that over the next few years, the lives we all live, the world we inhabit, will continue to change. We continue to experience a tough economic climate. As a nation, we will play host to the Commonwealth Games. There will most likely be a referendum on independence. There will be a general election, a Scottish parliamentary election, and another 2 years of talented students from Sabhal Mòr Ostaig will graduate and look to gain their first footholds on the employment ladder. For the BBC, we will look to reflect that future through our programmes and our content and across all our broadcast platforms, and in a way that best resonates with the needs and interests of our audiences. We will also look to what the future holds for the organisation as attention is turned towards the next charter, which we hope to see in place in 2017. With all of that, I can at the very least sound one note of reassurance that the world will continue to change and evolve, as will the digital media we use to interpret and interact with it. That is inevitable. However, so too is our commitment to continuing to help our audiences to understand and to navigate that digital world, offering to them both value and return for their financial investment in the licence fee, and most importantly, ensuring that in the BBC they are able to hear a voice in which they can trust. I was reminded recently of the adage, "A lie is halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on." In preparing this speech, I thought I would check the web to find out to whom the saying should be attributed. Well, depending on which website you believe, it was Mark Twain, Benjamin Disraeli, Winston Churchill, John F. Kennedy, former UK Prime Minister James Callaghan, American TV and radio writer Andy Rooney, and 19th century Baptist preacher C.H. Spurgeon. I'm opting for Spurgeon myself, assisted by the various Oxford reference works, but even that is in some dispute. Perhaps they all said it at one time or another, although perhaps another way to look at it is, as D.H. Lawrence said, and I can confirm that it was D.H. Lawrence who said, "We should never trust the teller, trust the tale." The digital world has brought with it access to a raft of information. That raft, if you will, indulge me in my metaphor, has to navigate some very treacherous waters, waters which often have dark and hidden depths. More than ever before, what is required, what we need, are trusted sources of honest, impartial information and news. For that reason, I will take issue with Mr. Lawrence. We need both tellers and tales we can believe in, and that, I firmly believe, above everything else, is why the BBC is as important today in our digital world as it ever has been. Thank you very much.